Are we ready? Okay. Uh, I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'm Kenneth Williams, City Manager of the City of Beaumont. And first of all, I'd like to welcome everyone today, whether you're watching it online or here in person, welcome. And this meeting is being recorded, correct? Okay. We want full transparency to make sure it's being recorded and it's being broadcast online. Just I'm gonna do a bit of a 30,000 foot view recap of where we are, and what we've done so far, and feel free to chime in on anything that's said differently. I'm not getting into much specifics, but last year we began to negotiate the new agreement with Local 399 in the city of Beaumont, and we went through those negotiations. We worked on that for a while until we got to a bit of an impasse. When we had an impasse, let me first say negotiators at that time was Joseph Telaez, your chief negotiator, and President Jeff Newsom and Cody Henson with resource support. Kenneth Wiggs, I was the chief negotiator at the time with the city attorney, Sheree Reed, and Kelly Albin from Denton, Navarro, Rocha, Bernal, and Zach. I leave Charlie off a lot of times, I forget, and Zach. So we were negotiating. And at that point, when we got to a bit of an impasse, Local 399 recommended a mediator, and the city of Beaumont agreed to a mediator. And you chose a mediator, and we agreed to it. So we agreed to that mediator in that process. We continued those discussions. I think, in my opinion, we got a lot done, and we got to a good point to whereby the city of Beaumont and Local 399 agreed to take you agreed to take a document that was discussed and talked about, agreed by both parties to take to your membership for a vote, realizing that we both had some things in there that maybe we didn't totally agree with at the time. So that went to a vote to Local 399. It was unanimously, easy for you to say, rejected. So we're back here for these discussions at this point today. We were supposed to meet on last Thursday. Again, with Open Meetings Act, we didn't get the meeting posted. Nothing nefarious happened. It was just a mistake on getting the meeting posted, but we're here just 3-4 days later to have this discussion. And we look forward to having this discussion and getting things done in this negotiation. So that's a bit of a high level recap. If there's anything else we'd like to say. Good. Okay. We do have a tentative agenda. I don't know if you have a copy or not. Okay. Okay, could you get them a copy, please? One of the first things on there is to confirm negotiating team members and chief negotiator for the union. You've had a change since our last discussion. So according to the ground rules that were established by both parties, that has to be established. So it looked like you have a new person with this. So could you tell us, Jeff, how that's going to go? No, we just want to establish your chief negotiator, because the person that was established as your chief negotiator is no longer at the table.
Jeff, can you turn on your mic?
So Mr. Morgan is going to be our chief negotiator. Myself and Cody Hendon, assistants.
Okay, and we'll remain the same as we are. Oh, you're talking about. Okay. We have ground rules, and I know you don't have to get familiar with them today. I know Mr. Morgan's new, so he hasn't seen those yet. Okay. So we're executing him as your chief negotiator.
And Jeff, for the record, did your alternates change at all?
No, our alternates are still the same, Brian Hebert and Mike Croker.
Thank you.
Sorry. Back in, I guess in February after the union vote, President Newsom, you sent me an email with some things that were of concern to Local 399, and we hope to talk about those things today for sure. But after we got that, and then May, I sent you a note saying let's resume negotiations, and then we got a response from Mr. Morgan that confirmed that. So here we are today. So. But before we get that, that's a timing thing. We want to confirm that the meeting will last to 12 p.m. We do that every time, how long the meeting's going to last. So we'll just say that it's at 12, and if anything changes, we'll both agree to it. Is that okay?
Agreed.
Okay. And I hope I don't get ahead of myself. And this, if I do, Sheree, keep me in line. In that email you sent to us, you said there were a couple of things that were really stood out.
Yes, Mr. Williams. So we did send you an email about a certain, several things that stood out to us. But what we were prepared for today, since our members voted down the last proposal that was sent to them, we've worked on putting together another proposal. And rather than going back in and explaining all the reasons why our members voted it down, I think that for the sake of speed and getting through this, we could just start in with our proposals. We've got everything in there. As we go through, we could maybe explain a couple of things if they come up. But a lot of these things in here were just the typos and situations that obviously we weren't going to be able to sign and make agreement to.
Okay, well, I would just said, you just said there were some inaccuracies, some typos in there, and then you mentioned about the assistant chief position. So those were the things I was going to mention.
Well, okay, well, yeah, that wasn't listed in here, but obviously the assistant chief was the biggest part of the reason why our members voted it down. We polled all of our members. I can't remember the percentage, but overall, that was the biggest concern we have.
Okay, we'll be glad to hear what you got.
Okay.
I'll ask Cody to put together a little presentation for you. We may need a flash drive or something. Mr. Williams, just before we do this, on the assistant chief issue, it's the opinion of the members that we don't need one yet, the law doesn't allow for one yet, and that we're opposed to a second assistant chief.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to bring the wage table up first. Might as well give me that list now. So you'll see we added cadet firefighter at the top. We'll get into that whenever we get to the hiring procedures article that you have on in that folder. We did not put anything in those spaces. It's our opinion that the city is wanting to move forward with the cadet program, and you guys can pick what you want to pay that cadet firefighter. The only other change is at the bottom, and there's a wage table added for all the EMS classifications. Those are also blank. We don't, we're not aware of what they are paid, but you guys are. So it would be a simple, I guess you would take what they pay, what they're paid right now, and then convert it into a salary and add that to the wage table. Our only concern is that they don't lose any money.
Yeah, we're not trying to increase anything on the city in this regard. So whatever you're paying them would just be converted to the hours worked into a salary instead of 56.48.
That's all I have to say about it.
Okay,
Y'all have any
we'll
questions?
talk about each one of these if we need to recess or whatever, and if there's any discussion, you just go through your presentation.
Okay. You can move to the wages article that's in that folder. This one's pretty simple. It's just removing that section 2, something that I think we missed before when we were talking. Adding, now that we've added the assistant chief into the wage table, the wages for the assistant chief are set by negotiations. So it's just unnecessary language. Next, the hiring. So in this one, hang on just a second. So at the top, grade 1, we removed just the words grade 1 since there's an addition of the cadet program in this proposal. And then the language in blue is essentially adding in the cadet program. We have elected to offer an extension of the probationary year for anybody that comes in that doesn't have both of their certifications, to extend that to 18 months. That's allowable by law. But instead of doing it for each one of them, we can just go ahead and agree to extend it contractually right now. I believe the rest of it kind of speaks for itself. But if you had any questions, I can answer those. All right. We can move on to the additional pay. Section 3. Section 3 would be language that would be helpful, I think, to accomplish what the city is wanting to accomplish with the training reimbursement agreement. That was one of the things that was listed when we polled our members when they voted the contract down before. That particular agreement was a sticking point for a lot of our members. A lot of the issues came from wanting a reimbursement of all of the pay, overtime, everything that was included with the training.
So is this new coding or something changed? You have a color coded, is that?
Yeah, it's blue. It's new.
Oh,
It's just new language to try to accomplish what you guys are trying to accomplish with that tuition or training reimbursement agreement. I think it accomplishes a lot of the same thing. It just doesn't include the pay associated with the training.
But
Our members just looked at it as a little bit of an overstep, asking for, it's just a lot to ask for reimbursement for all the pay and overtime associated with training. Tuition, fees, books, those type of, this is more in line with what the city does in the tuition reimbursement program.
my question was just because of the color. Since my eyes are a little older, the blue looked black, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I could have picked
That's all it
a
was.
different
That's all
color.
no problem.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Under section 1 of incentive pay, we talked about this a lot. I think it was missed by us, but that eliminating teams in between agreements, our members are not in agreement with. We added the dive team language back in. That was one of the things that was missed before. We discussed it. It just, I think it got missed in when we combined all of the different articles. So that's old language. It's just added in. And we're just going to reapproach the ambulance assignment pay now that we have all of the attorneys in the room. That's a kind of a big deal for our members. We put it back in here. We put it at a rate of $96 per shift. The thought process behind that is we have an issue, obviously, with drivers and upgrades and issues associated with that. So our proposal would be to make it $96 per shift, but to take the driver positions off of the ambulance and staff those ambulances with firefighters. They would be paid $96 a shift. That's obviously, it's divisible by 24 in case there's a partial. And taking that driver pay away and the upgrade pay away, the upgrade being removed solves some of the issues that we had with the temporary promotions article. And it's also a bit of a reduction in pay, looking at the different levels of firefighters that are being upgraded and the amount that they're paid per shift for upgrade versus that $96 per shift. So that's where we're at on that.
Just so I'm clear, so under this, only firefighters would drive ambulances?
Only firefighters would be staffed on ambulances, yes. We would waive the temporary promotions. Oh, well, yeah, sure. I'm not, are you getting it? We would remove the single certified people from ambulances? We're just talking about
Yes,
the
that's what I'm asking.
firefighters that fill in the gaps on the ambulances. It would be firefighters, not drivers. All those single certified EMS folks will still be on ambulances. We're not taking away those positions. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay. We can always come back to it. If y'all didn't have anything else, we can go to the next one. So the committees. We've essentially gone back to original language on the Health and Safety Committee. We believe that that committee is very important and it doesn't need to be delayed to whenever someone deems it necessary to meet. And we'd like to keep it at the once a month. And we'd like to keep it as a joint committee, being equal employer and union. We were okay with the random drug testing policy that was attached as an appendix. And we're okay with the operational guidelines committee. aside from the language in section F that's crossed through. Definitions. In committee chair, I don't remember exactly how this all came about, but equivalent, putting his designee, I think, works just the same as equivalent, but it allows some flexibility there. If the assistant chief is not available, then he can assign someone to take his place if it has his designee. Just a small change. And the probationary firefighter is adjusted to account for what you saw in the entry-level hiring procedures proposal. Temporary promotions. So in this one, we obviously talked about this a ton before, and we're not necessarily against the language that we agreed on, but believe it should be put into a policy. We're okay with the policy being amended while we're doing this. And if the policy is amended and agreed upon before we sign the contract, then it'll be it will accomplish the same thing without putting policy language in the contract. That's all. And seniority, promotions, and transfers. We added some language there in section 1 that has to do with the cadet program. It's just essentially establishing how the seniority for the cadet firefighters is calculated or decided on. And yeah, that's all we have on that one. And hours and overtime. This one is very simple. As one of those typos that we talked about. The shift is 7 to 5 in fire alarm, and it was 7 to 6 in the final document that we got before. So it's just changing 6 back to 5.
Did you highlight on there? Is that supposed to be indicative of something?
It's just a change. It was already highlighted.
Okay, so the rest of it doesn't have anything we should be looking at?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Mm-mm. That's it.
I think that pretty much sets out our view on the proposed contract.
Can I ask what the hangup over the second assistant chief is? Like, what's the reasoning that was?
I don't think we have enough people in the department to qualify.
So the union, of course, wants to include the EMS personnel, right, into the agreement?
Right.
which will expand it to,
If it gets above 300, then you get one. If it doesn't, you don't.
well, within the 3 years that this contract is proposed, I think what is it gonna be, just 6 or 7 under if the EMS gets,
Probably a little less. Would y'all entertain language that says the language straight from 143 that says that when a department reaches 300, they're entitled to 2 assistant chiefs, and when the department reaches 600, they're entitled to 3? Just pull the language exactly from the statute.
I think we could discuss that. But to your point, if we bring in the EMS personnel into this agreement, it doesn't change anything. Those people already work here. So
well, in terms of the assistant chief, if the justification is there's not enough in the department for there to be another assistant chief, and that's the only hang up over that on the union side, then pulling EMS into the contract and considering them for the purpose of whether or not you hit 300, I think as Sheree said, then having an automatic triggering provision where if 300 is hit with the combined EMS and firefighters, then I think both sides have, maybe can agree to that.
They're in the department now. The numbers are there.
I understand that, and we could argue this all day long. My view is they're not firefighters for all the reasons we've discussed in the lawsuit. So when 143 says only firefighters count towards that number, we just want to make sure that it's not going to be the position of the union that EMS is in the contract, but when the assistant chief position is being considered, well, we're not going to count EMS towards the total number in the department in terms of when we get to 300. That's the problem on our side that I want to make sure we're addressing.
They will all be civil service personnel, whether they're firefighters or EMTs, is our argument. And our side is that they would be civil service personnel. In civil service, it's 300 civil service employees is whenever the second assistant chief kicks in, if negotiated. So as long as we have that many 300 civil service employees, which, and with the addition when we're fully staffed, that would be the time when it could be negotiated.
So you mean no vacancies?
Absolutely. I mean, following the city ordinance that it sets aside how many firefighters we're supposed to have.
I guess
Up until the EMS merger, we didn't have any more than a couple of vacancies at a time. And there was an established list, civil service list to hire from whenever there were any vacated positions. So getting back to that level where we're supposed to be, I mean, right now, if the city council establishes a city ordinance that says there's supposed to be 300 civil service employees here, but you don't plan to fill them or you don't fill them, then the city's in violation of a city ordinance.
Well, I'm gonna have to disagree that the city's in violation of an ordinance, as long as there's attempts. I mean, the process is what it is, and it takes a while to backfill those positions. And my understanding is the efforts being made to test and try to fill the vacancies, but that's a separate issue. I just wanted to make sure we're in agreement that it's not gonna be a situation where if the city agrees to this, we're agreeing that the 300 is the mark that triggers the second assistant chief automatically. And then there's going to be a grievance later that you don't get to count EMS personnel in that because they're not firefighters.
We keep referring, they're civil service employees. That's
They're
what
not
they are.
yet. They're,
No, I understand, but I'm saying it's civil service. It doesn't matter if they're firefighter or EMS, it's civil service. So the numbers are the numbers. In other words, we would not take out an EMT person by saying he's not a firefighter. We're dealing with civil service employees.
I just want to make sure that that's the understanding from the.
back to my original point, would the union consider just using the language directly from the statute as a triggering mark? Okay, that's why I asked if you consider it.
Okay, thanks for your presentation. I'd like to call a recess for us to talk about some of your recommendations. And for 30 minutes, is that a good time? For 30 minutes, we'll come back at about 18, let's make it 10:20. Oh, yeah, about 10:20. Let's make it 10:20. We'll call the meeting back to order if you're ready. And I'll turn it over to City Attorney Reed.
The list, we didn't make any, have time to make any written changes to the documents. I'll just do them orally, if that's okay. So on committee chair, fine with that change. But we did have questions on probationary firefighter, because it's not really only mentioned at least one time in the contract versus cadet firefighter. So obviously, we're fine with changing well, not obviously, but we are okay with increasing the probationary period to 18 months. But there was a question as to whether or not we needed to, I guess, define what a cadet would be, since that's a term that's used throughout the contract, but we didn't have any additional that.
So is the intent of the union to have probationary and cadet, are those interchangeable? Or is there a difference in your mind between what those two things are?
The probationary period defined by civil services, 1 year to 18 months. It can be extended up to 18 months if both of us agree for someone who is in training. So if they are a cadet, then their probationary period would be the 18 months. If they're not a cadet and hired within the fire department because they're already certified, then their probationary period would only be 1 year.
Okay, so you're contemplating two different probationary periods.
Yes, one for a cadet and one for a dual certified firefighter that's hired.
Okay, so the way I have always seen probationary firefighters, that term used, is after they're sworn in, so they're finished with their training, and they're sworn in as firefighters, that's what starts the probationary period. It sounds like you're talking about something different.
Yeah, that's why we put up to 18 months. So whatever is needed there. So with the cadet, you would need the 18 months because they have to go through training. With a dual certified firefighter that you hire like you have been, you wouldn't need that extra 6 months. So it would just be the normal 1 year probationary year. Grouping it all into one might cause confusion. We can separate it out. That goes with what you're saying about defining the cadet, and that's fine.
Okay.
But there wouldn't be any need to do an 18-month probationary period for a dual certified firefighter, because they don't have to go through training.
Okay. The next one was the seniority and promotions article. So I guess like currently like rookies aren't entitled to contractual benefits. And so we would think that like cadets weren't either until after they're out of their probationary year. And so we currently determine seniority by when they're sworn in. Are we trying to change that, or are we still doing that? Like, how is that?
So I think there may be some confusion right now on this sworn in, civil service, not civil service. When an employee, a civil service employee, takes a civil service exam, this employee is hired in accordance with civil service. They're into a department. They are civil service employees from the date of hire. They are on probation for 1 year, which means that they are, for lack of better terms, just an at-will employee. So they could be fired for any reason, and they aren't able to appeal being fired, but they are eligible for all the other benefits under civil service and collective bargaining, except for that. They're still an at-will employee. I don't know if that clears anything up, or were we on the same page, or were we not?
Yeah, so yeah, I guess my question was, because I understood what you were saying, I guess my question was for this purpose, is it trying to change the existing practice, or are we clarifying the existing practice just because we're adding a cadet program?
Yeah, we're clarifying because we're adding a cadet program.
Okay. Then I guess my question would be is like, how is this different from what we currently do? Using the scenarios you just gave, because they've taken the civil service exam, they've sat for the test, they've done it. So wouldn't they just follow the same procedure like within the contract because they've already, essentially, it's not really different because they're going to sit for the test, they're going to go through the training, so it wouldn't be any.
Well, the reason we put the wording this way, that they would, their seniority as a firefighter would start at the graduation of the cadet program, is because the city will continue to hire dual certified firefighters that will start the job and are able to start the job earlier than the firefighters that have to go through the training.
So
once
they're-
they're done with their training,
So, okay, but my understanding is that there's two separate lists. So if it's, because the dual cert guys are going to start on the date of their list and the other guys will not, is that the concern?
there wouldn't be two lists. You just give one test and everybody's on the list. And so maybe your top 3 people are dual certified and you pull them. Well, the next 2 people on the list may not be certified. So you pull them and they go to the training. And then when they're done with the training, they filter back into the department. So you wouldn't have 2 lists. You just give one civil service test. And
So I think that there's a disconnect because it was our understanding that there would be a dual certified list and a single cert list, and we would exhaust the dual list first and then hire from the single cert list. So I guess that's a misunderstanding.
right, well, you can skip over individuals that are on the list to be able to get the dual certified people that you want. And then after you get the dual certified people you want, then you send the others. So there's too many openings to not, to have that problem. You're not going to have enough dual certified people. You're going to get to the single certified people that have to go to training.
I'm aware, but I guess my question was because you're not, because you are going to exhaust one list before you get to the second list, in my mind, then how would this, again, the question is like, why is this language necessary if you're going to have that second list and we're going to promote and send them through the program like we normally do?
Yeah, it's not a second list. We give a civil service exam.
No,
They pass a test.
no,
they're
I've
all-
already
they're all-
said that was probably a disconnect in our
Yeah, right,
understanding.
they're all put in the same order. But you may have dual certified people, and then you may have another single certified person underneath them.
But that's not what's happening right
Or
now.
Well, we don't have
high school
we're not
graduate.
hiring single certified right now.
Right, so you're talking about something new. This is not building off of what's already existing. So you're saying you want one civil service test, and even if we're bringing somebody on who's only a paramedic, and that's the only certification they have and that's all they're gonna do, they're gonna sit and take the same test that you are gonna administer for people who are coming in to be a firefighter.
Right.
Okay,
And it could be a high school graduate, not a single cert even.
well, they probably won't meet the age requirements, but
Yeah, they will.
I think it's higher for firefighter.
Like a civil service cadet program, they'd come in uncertified and have to go get certified. They'd have their 12 to 18 months to become dual.
No, so in the cadet program, it was proposed that they would already come in as an EMT.
We're not bringing anyone in as our position. They're in and they're EMTs. We're talking about hiring future employees. So as long as you meet the civil service requirements to be hired to go through the fire department, then you come in as an uncertified and you got your time period there to go get dual certified.
So that's what I'm telling you, that's different from what the chief has proposed for his cadet program. His proposed cadet program is that they come in with their EMT certification and they send them to the fire academy, and that we send existing firefighters that already have their certification to paramedic school to get increased certification. So we're changing the hiring process altogether.
Now, no, not really. The hiring process, I think, has always been, I think y'all chose to only hire dual cert. But I think the requirements of civil service, is anyone can sit for the exam. So, and I didn't understand that the chief's cadet deal dealt with anyone other than the current EMTs.
Yeah, so there's two, I guess almost like 3 programs running right now. The first program is with existing firefighters. They can go to paramedic school and then get credentialed within the department for higher pay. And then the second one is that existing EMS employees can go to the fire academy and they can become dual certified firefighters. And then the third proposal was to hire EMTs as cadets. So they would hire in as already having their EMT basics, and then we would send them to the fire academy to become dual certified. And of course, if they didn't have their paramedic credentials, they could also apply once they finish their probationary period in the fire department to go back to get paramedic school.
Those are three distinct categories that work. The fourth one is some guy that is graduating from high school that wants to be a fireman and is willing to go through the program and get dual certified. That's one other group that we've not identified.
Okay. So that's a change to our current practice. So we'll have to talk about that one a little more. Okay. Now, with that understanding, that makes sense. The next one was the committees. We're fine with keeping the regularly meeting schedule, but we believe that it's a necessity that the union provide a list of the appointed members to the chief. We thought that was a necessity. So just kind of need to know who's going to be working on those committees.
Okay.
The additional pay. So didn't really have a problem with adding the language in blue, but the employees would still need to we would amend the employment agreement to match the language that's in the contract, because the employees still need to sign a separate employment agreement for schooling. The dive team obviously was fine. That was just an oversight. And we'll need to calculate the $96 to determine the financial impact to the city before we can provide a response on that one.
And just to be clear, you're talking about dual certified there, right?
The only other thing that we would want to add in the blue language is for both the National Registry test and even for the Fire Academy, they have max attempts. I believe Fire Academy is 2 and the National Registry for the DISH is 3. So we want to add language that employees would pay back money if they fail to complete or meet a minimum passing score after they've maxed out their attempts.
And can you go back to the 96 too?
Yeah.
I know we're going to have to calculate that to get an idea of the impact, but can you help us understand the logic in having a dual certified employee who's essentially a higher level, higher paid employee than a single cert, right? And they're going to get assignment pay to work in a lower category of job assignment? I mean, you're wanting them to get assignment pay to come down and work an assignment that that a single cert is always doing. I'm struggling with the logic in that, I guess.
So I believe the idea with this incentive pay is the same as the idea that other departments use for incentive pay for the ambulance. Many of the firefighters that join the fire department didn't join with the idea of being on an ambulance. So this is a change. It's a departure from the normal fire department structure. We have a fire EMS structure now. So it's just an incentive to, again, this takes away the upgrade pay. So it's just to create an incentive to fill those spots. We're filling EMS spots. So I don't know how to answer your question, honestly.
I think I can help just a little bit, is that what I think that Cody's trying to say is that our firefighters our firefighters in this department was not a fire-based EMS department up until just a couple of years ago. Now you've taken these firefighters that were firefighters. They didn't bring ambulances. They didn't bring ambulances to the hospital. They didn't run as many calls as they did before. Now you've added an entirely new job to those firefighters. I mean, they're now doing the job of firefighter and paramedics in our department. They're still firefighters. Those firefighters that are on the ambulances that day could very well be fighting a fire that day as well. I mean, that's been happening right now. If an ambulance is available and there's a way for those firefighters that are on the ambulance, they're doing two jobs during that day. And that's where our thought is behind that you've increased the responsibilities of our firefighters by doing an entirely new job.
A job that a single cert comes in and does at a lower wage than the firefighters make. Just so we're clear.
You could also calculate it to give it to all the EMS only personnel too, since there's a hang up on that.
Yeah.
We could give it to both of them. That way there's not a disparity there.
Well, it's not the assignment pay. It's the fact that the base wage of the single cert is to do exactly what you're saying a dual cert or higher level employee should get paid more to have to come in and do. That was the question, but I think you've answered it.
I think what he said is a concession there, but we're open to all of those employees getting that same incentive pay.
It's a
If
concession.
that would be something that the city would like.
It's whose concession?
It's ours. You know, I mean, we could negotiate for all the single certified to get that incentive pay as well.
So the concession is that the dual cert firefighters get paid more to do what the single cert do without assignment pay. That's the concession the union's making.
I'm not sure I understood what you were saying
Well,
just now, but
you said the union was making a concession. I'm trying to understand. I think what I heard you say was the concession that the union is willing to make is that the single cert EMTs get paid the flat rate with no incentive, and the dual cert working down a level get an assignment pay. That's the concession, is the EMTs don't get anything for doing that same job, but the firefighters do.
I just said that you could calculate, whenever you have to do the calculation, calculate it for everybody that's on an ambulance, single certified or dual certified.
Right.
Then there's not any confusion there.
And Mr. Neeson said the union was willing to make a concession. I was trying to figure out what that was.
I think concession was probably just a poor use of word.
yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
So I also just want to clarify, the city didn't add additional responsibilities and change the structure of the fire department. It was, the union requested to merge EMS, and that was with the support of the fire chief, and the council agreed to that. I guess I've said this a lot, at the time, I don't think anybody fully understood what that meant, having a fire-based EMS and the effect that would have on existing firefighters. But it's not the city who just threw this in. So
I mean, I think that's beside the point. There was a mutual agreement to
was.
come to this, but we've also increased our responsibilities over the last several months. Our fire chief has changed protocols that have added a lot of responsibilities to our members.
I'm not denying that there's been an increase in the job description. I just wanted to make it clear that it wasn't something that the city did unilaterally, that it was a joint decision by the parties. And I don't think anybody at the time knew how big of a change it would be to transition from a fire department to a fire-based EMS department. And so I'm just acknowledging that it wasn't just one-sided, that it was a understanding behind both parties.
And we don't think it'll be a financial negative impact on the city
Okay.
once you study it.
The other part that I kind of skipped over is the part where the chief has the ability to eliminate or create teams with the city manager's approval. I know that there's some concern about elimination, but I do think the chief should reserve the right to be able to organize the department for efficiency. If the union wants to compromise on that and say that, that they want to receive notice of the elimination of the team, or they want to have some type of discussion beforehand. But I do think that the chief should reserve the right to be able to organize and establish teams based on the needs of the department.
Those special teams represent a benefit to our members, so if he wants to eliminate a team, right now would be the time to do it.
Okay, well, then we'll talk about that.
Good deal.
No change, we were fine with the 5. I think that was just a typo, so we obviously can make that change. And for their wages, easy change, we're fine. We're removing section 2, but instead of just removing it all in its entirety, we would like to add the language that upon 300 sworn allotted position, the chiefs shall be entitled to 2 assistant chiefs.
May I ask why you think there's a need for an assistant chief?
Well, I guess just for the purpose that the department has changed. It wasn't a fire-based EMS system before. There's more responsibilities. The current structure requires them to have a chief that's over operations and a chief that's over administration, so that, you know, in that structure, firefighters need to report.
Well, actually, it doesn't. As of last week, in an effort, I'm assuming, to be more efficient, you wouldn't normally make changes to be less efficient, but in an effort to be more efficient, a new protocol came out in org chart where everybody reports to the assistant fire chief now. He's handling the entire department. No one else reports to the fire chief but the assistant. So he's already able to handle the entire department. So why do we need another one?
So that's a new chart. There is also one that has if there was a second assistant chief as well. So there's 2 charts. That I think that's the existing one that just came out, and it came out relatively new. So we don't know that that's the best possible efficient way to do things because it's new. I think under the old one, they did have individuals reporting to the chief. I think in the old chart that didn't really address EMS, I think they were all reporting to the chief. So I think under there's a proposed chart for 2 assistant chiefs as well that kind of separates administration and operations.
I think what we received was a change as opposed to a proposal. It was a change, but it didn't change like the SOGs. Nothing got changed there. It certainly has its issues, but it is the new org
Yes,
chart.
No, I agree with you that, but I'm saying there's also a proposed chart with 2 chiefs as well. So the one you have is the one that was adopted and presented to the membership, but there's also one proposed for 2 chiefs as well,
That has not been given to the membership?
because there's not 2 chiefs.
Well, no, you said there's one. Yeah, if there's 2 chiefs, I got it, but there's not.
Right.
And so right now, it'd be hard to justify even with 300 because we got about 295 right here that report to 1.
Because they can't report to 2 because there isn't a second one yet. So
But how is this more efficient than the one before where you had four chiefs that then reported up to the fire chief? How is that more efficient?
it's, okay, so I feel like this argument is
It's not an argument.
nonsensical because there's no way to put into place the efficiency that would be achieved with 2 assistant chiefs right now because there isn't a second assistant chief. So the city has to work within the existing parameters, which is 1 assistant chief,
Well, on Wednesday, we had 4 chiefs reporting to the fire chief.
not assistant chiefs.
No, had 1 assistant chief and three deputies
Right.
reporting to the fire chief.
I mean, the bottom line is an additional level of supervision creates the ability for assistant chiefs to specialize and oversee 2 distinct departments, administration and operation, which is really standard in any sizable department, that you have multiple assistant chiefs. And having a single assistant chief who's overseeing almost 300 people versus one who's overseeing maybe a third, something like that, is more efficient.
I think you used the right word, sizable. We're not sizable yet. And so there's really no reason to have a second org chart for a second assistant chief The law doesn't allow it right now. We don't qualify right now for that. And at 300, it's negotiable as to whether we have one or not. And so
Well, the law contemplates that at 300, you're sizable enough for two. That's why it's written that way.
you're sizable enough to go to the union and say, we'd like to work with you about a second chief.
It's a triggering event actually for departments that don't have a CBA where it's automatic. So
Right.
it's not just that every city at 300 has to go plead with the union for a second one. It's that at 300, the law says you're big enough now for two. If you have a CBA, then you discuss it in negotiations.
But we do have a CBA, so we do negotiate.
Understood, but we're talking about what the 300 signifies.
And is it, your understanding it's active members as opposed to ordinance positions?
It's authorized strength. That's our understanding.
I guess my question is, why wouldn't the union want to have two chiefs if we get to 300?
It goes back to what we talked about in, God, I don't know, November last year. We don't have any way to get to 300. So we can change it on paper and say that we're allotted a strength of 400 people, but we don't have a way to get there.
That's pretty subjective.
It's not
Cody.
subjective.
It is subjective,
Well, we're
because
35.
we can get there, you can get there if you try hard enough. So I just really want to know, why do you not want two chiefs at 300? Not to say we can't get there. If we got there, why would you not want it?
If we got there. No, nobody's saying if we got there that we would be against it.
Well,
We have
we're
to get
saying
there
to give
first.
us, we get to 300, let us have it. So if we get to 300,
300 active employees.
300 positions
Because you're never going to
allocated.
be fully
No,
staffed.
no fire department or police department in this country is fully staffed. Show me one.
Baytown, before they just added positions to their
They're
department.
not fully staffed.
Okay.
We can talk
But then
about,
I get
we're not opposed to a second chief at some point in time, a second assistant chief.
at 300.
At some point in time, we can talk about the number. Maybe it's 320. At 320, you get one.
Well, is it the law that says 300 we could?
No, it says at 300, you get to negotiate. Maybe the thing to do, so we don't have to negotiate, we do it now and say something like 320. At 320, it's automatic.
Well, the union's getting a lot of concessions from the city, and this is something that the city feels is an important point. And it is justified under the law as well as other departments. I mean, that is, find another department with 300 allotted positions that doesn't have the second assistant chief. So there is a need. More supervision allows for more efficiency, allows for, I mean, that's just common sense that having to supervise less people is going to create a better operation.
I think we're just talking about when this second assistant shows up. That's all. You want
Right.
300, I said 320.
Why 320? What is the difference in the 20? How does that,
Because if you have 300 and you have 50 vacancies, you don't really need him. But if you have 320 and you have 20 vacancies, you still have 300, and maybe you do need him.
do we have 50 vacancies? No.
No, I'm just saying,
Well,
we have
but
an
you're just
older
throwing-
force that's
that's
retiring a lot.
That's arbitrary numbers that you're throwing out. 300 is something that is a number that is established in the law for departments to have a second one if they don't have a CBA. So I understand we have to discuss it because there's a CBA here, but that doesn't mean that 300 number isn't legitimate and justified.
It also doesn't mean we have to do it now. You don't have 300. Get 300 and come back.
No, we don't want to come back. We're working out we're trying to get to an agreement so we don't have to keep coming back, so that both the city and the union have the same expectations and we can eliminate conflict going forward. So to say we'll just kick that can down the road and deal with it later doesn't seem like it's in the spirit of trying to get to an actual agreement that both sides can live with.
It's in the spirit of the law. The law says until 300, you're not entitled to one. We don't have 300.
Right.
Why are we talking about it now?
Because we want to put in the contract that at 300, it's triggered and we don't have to come back to the table and go round and round like we're doing now. That's why.
And if you did, we'd be doing the same thing then, if we had to come back.
So if we came back at 300, the union would be saying, now we think it should be 320.
We would negotiate with you at 300, once you're there.
We're talking about getting to 300 and saying that we're not fully staffed. We've been at 255 per the ordinance for a while now, and we've done nothing but lose people. We're now, if we're talking the number, I believe we're somewhere around 35 firefighters short now. Ever since we added the 255 in the ordinance, we've shrunk. And so if we can't get to the 255 right now because we can't change the hiring practice, and you just change the ordinance to 300, what good does that do our firefighters?
But I think it's important to point out that half of those vacancies that you're reporting are new positions that the city added at the request of the union.
No, ma'am, they're not. They were moved over from EMS and they
Exactly.
were converted.
To SORN, yeah, so those are the vacancies that you're
They
referring to
were
as well.
vacancies that were already in EMS. We've been at 300, budgeted for 300 now. Ever since the merger started, there were no new positions added. There were
we're talk-
civil service positions converted from civilian positions.
But you're talking about the ordinance numbers versus the department numbers, and I think that that's misleading. The department sworn positions that you're referring to, 12 of those are the positions that we moved over. So if you're talking solely about those numbers on that side, I think it's clear to point out that half of those are at least half, are the new 12 that we added. So if you're talking department-wide, that's one thing, but if you're talking ordinance-based, 12 of those are new that we added.
I think the point that he's trying to make is department-wide staffing. Again, if we can't get to 255 right now, take the 12 away, we're still not at that number. So if we can't hire people to be able to get to the low number that we're at right now, then how in the world are we going to get enough people to be at 300 that would
So
trigger to you that you need an extra executive level chief?
So I'm glad you
don't need
point
an
that out,
extra executive
because-
level chief running a department that's smaller than it was 5 years ago.
And I'm glad you pointed that out, because department-wide is not what you look at when you look at civil service, because you also have administrative staff that's included in your department numbers that's not counted towards that. And
I'm aware of that.
exactly. So the ordinance and the statute are limited to sworn positions. And so if we're talking about just sworn positions, not department-wide, then some of those vacancies are attributed to the new positions that were added. And that's all I'm asking that you consider, so that there's not this mass consideration for that. And when you're looking, if we're going to talk about and negotiate, then we all have to be on the same page. Are we talking about department-wide? Or are we talking about sworn-wise? Are we talking about operational vacancies or the entire department? I think it's unfair if we don't talk about the same things. If we're going to have the discussion, then we at least need to be on the same page about what exactly we're talking about. Because talking about a department-wide versus ordinance versus sworn, it's not the same.
I believe we're talking about sworn employees.
Okay, so
Well,
making
there's more
distinction
than
bet-
255 sworn.
then making the distinction between,
Based on what you guys understand sworn to be, which is inclusive of the EMS personnel,
Well,
Right.
once the lawsuit is settled, yes.
if the lawsuit is settled. But, so again, I want to make sure, because this was the concern I had with having the discussion about the assistant chiefs, is that making sure we're all talking about the same thing. So we talked this morning about getting to the 300, which would qualify for the second assistant chief, would be inclusive of EMS personnel. And now you're talking about there only being 255 positions, which is a little deceptive, because when we're saying we've got to get to 300, you're making it sound like it's 255 to 300. But you're also asking the city to consider the EMS personnel sworn. So it's not 255. That's not the number. And the vacancies are also different. So again, to Sheree's point, I feel like sometimes we're using language to describe one thing and sometimes something else when it's convenient to throw out a different number. But it's not going from 255 to 300 if the city agrees to classify the EMS personnel as sworn. Can we agree to that? That 255 is not the number if the EMS personnel are taken into account.
Correct. That's not the point that anybody over here is making.
It is the point because you're saying
Right, you just
we
don't
can't even get to
understand.
Oh, I understand.
Okay, well then,
We're trying to get from 255 to 300, but that's not where we're at if we do what the union has asked. So it's not being presented accurately is the problem that I have.
Part of it is about operations, about efficiencies and span of control. You know, I think Mr. Morgan held up a sheet that said that one person had 295 people under him, the way it's currently configured. So having an assistant chief is able to spread those responsibilities and have fewer people under them to be able to be a more efficient department and come up with more ways to get more people hired and get things done. It's more than just we want a number. It's more about becoming a better department, a more efficient department, better operations, more productive department. And that's how I envision it. And I still would like to hear the reason why the union doesn't want this. I hear your argument about numbers, but we can't solve it until we know why you really don't want it. And tell us why you don't want it, and we can work toward resolving it.
Organizationally, the day before the new org chart came out, everyone thought it was pretty efficient. Everybody knew what they're operating under, et cetera. You're talking about now changing the whole system. You've moved dispatch over under operations. From logistics, you've got all kinds of issues with your new org chart. We don't really know all the impact. We just got this last Thursday or Friday, so we don't know the impact there. But the one that had the 4 different reports to the chief seemed to be much more efficient. We operated without a problem there. And so, our hiring is a problem. We're trying to hire only dual certified. It's harder to find that. If you've got a vacancy in your department, why aren't we trying to hire pursuant to the civil service? Why aren't we just testing everybody that wants to be a fireman and put them through the program as opposed to only wanting dual certs? It all goes back into, we need to get the numbers up. I mean, as a city, as citizens, we all want protection from fire and things that happen around here where we need these guys. And so we're fine with, as the department grows, having more supervision, but we need the department to grow. So,
And we both agree
maybe right now is not
on
the,
that.
not
Let's
the
find
time.
something we agree on. We mutually agree we want the department to get more numbers. But how do we get there? That's my thing. Let's figure out how to get there. That is something that's amenable to both sides. And that's what I would like to do, not to figure out ways why it's not good for both sides. Let's find something that works for both sides and try to get through that process.
We can do that. We can caucus here in a minute once we get through with her responses.
Okay. Under temporary promotions, we noticed that all the language dealing with the schedule had been removed. And although we agree that there does need to be a policy in place to kind of shape that, we do think it needs to be guided by some contractual language, as some of the other policies that deal with pay are. So we're open to know if, like, what changes, if we want to go back to visit that, if we need to, revisit that language. But we do think that there needs to be some contractual language in place to guide whatever policy comes from that. The last one, I think we've kind of touched on this already. I think the union is proposing to go to a single cert hiring or no cert hiring process. So that kind of answers one of our questions. But also just, I think this language would just need to be more aligned with what the city's currently doing under the cadet program. And again, if the city's going to consider a single cert or no cert hiring process, well, not a single cert, but a no cert hiring process, then we'll need to discuss that because that was one of the things that was unclear. As it relates to D, that's something that we're already doing. So that's not a big deal. And I think there were some questions about C that I feel like that's already kind of been answered just based on the previous discussions, but.
Yeah, I just think on this point, I want to make sure we're clear. Is the union's position that this if this language is added, it would require that the city hire folks who don't have any certifications and allow them to go through the program.
No. We left all the language that gives the city the ability to hire how you want to. If you would like to hire by civil service law, the attempt was made with the language in blue to cover that as well. It covers either single certified or no certified.
But it does not mandate that the city hire no cert.
That's correct.
All right.
It doesn't mandate it, but as we're talking about trying to, all parties wanting to figure out a way to hire people, we highly suggest that you would hire in accordance with civil service. We believe that's how you will get the numbers. We haven't changed any of that so far. We've heard of changes, but in the last 4 years that we've been requesting them, that hasn't happened. So obviously, we would like to see the city just hire in accordance with civil service.
I have one other issue, but if I would like to talk offline about it. I don't know if I can talk to them offline. Is that acceptable? My attorney looks at me when I say stuff like that, and I certainly don't want to get outside those negotiation parameters, but because I don't like surprise, I don't like to be surprised, and I don't want you to be surprised. So if there's a way I can bring up the subject first, make you aware of it before I bring it up, either I can bring it up now, whatever's fine.
I have no idea. So like I'm looking at you like I don't know. Do you want to tell me first? It's fine.
If it's fine to discuss that off the record, then we're fine with it.
Well, no, it's a contractual thing, so I don't. Yeah, if you just want to, it's a contractual thing, so it's probably better on the record.
Okay, sounds like y'all said it's okay, so I'll just bring it up. No, I just want to get the union's opinion on co-location dispatch centers. I've worked in other areas in other cities where there were co-located centers that were very, very efficient, very productive, did a lot for regions, did a lot for communities. So I just kind of want to see what you think about that. You've probably been made aware that this was on my mind, but I wanted to talk to you about it. I know right now we're currently staffing fire dispatch with firefighters. And this would be a way to get those firefighters out there on the street like other cities are, using civilians to do that. So I'm not asking for that now, but I would like to hear an opinion on it because it's very productive. It really helps regions. People can work together, police, fire departments in the region, and it would also get us more firefighters out on the street.
We've had this discussion in the past, the city and the union. I wasn't involved back then when it's happened, but we've actually been to arbitration twice, to my knowledge, over that, where our dispatch office is to remain civil service. So if we had a joint office, it'd be fine. However, our dispatchers are civil service personnel. It's covered under the statute. We've been through this multiple times with the city, and that's the way we believe it should stay.
Okay, I wasn't privy to that back then, but I've been in other places where those were very sensitive discussions, so I know how sensitive it can be, but I also know how productive it can be and get us out of silos and put productive people on the street, get some people in some positions, and be able to use city resources, because they're all city resources, even at the fire department, to go much further in what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. It's some great models around the state of Texas and the country for this.
I understand, and we believe that our members, that's one of the most important things to us, is that we have an extremely productive dispatch office, that we have the professionals in there that we need, and that's what, being civil service, being under our contract, that's what that provides. When these individuals are in there answering 911 calls and they're talking people through emergencies on the phone, working with those patients before we get there, we think it's really important that we have a dispatcher that's knowledgeable of everything. Same thing when a structure fire comes in, that we have someone that's in there that has been out there on the street, that knows what needs to be dispatched, that is fully capable of being able to do that. That's a higher standard of our dispatch office. There's also been some things that the chief's been trying to implement that we believe are good things. We know that you guys are looking to add a clinical navigator into the dispatch office. But again, other civil service employees, and having them promote through our process. These people could be critical in triaging or figuring out what to do in those cases when we're deciding whether or not to send an ambulance. We want people who know the job, know what they're talking to, who they're talking to on the phone, and be able to understand that. That's what we think is the most important, to stay with the system that we've got, where we're putting our experienced firefighters in those positions.
I commend all professional dispatchers. Civilian dispatchers are very well-trained, very well qualified, and I wouldn't put them below anybody for what the job that they do. So I don't think somebody being a civil service person makes them any more qualified to be a dispatcher than the professional people that are around the country doing dispatching. It's a very, very well thought of profession, so I commend them. But basically, I was just talking about being more efficient, being more qualified. You're saying we need more firefighters on the street. We got 12 firefighters sitting in dispatch that could be on the street. And I'll just ask your opinion of it. I wanted to talk to you offline, not here, but it's just a way to do things better and get more people on the street.
The last one was the wages. We saw that the EMS were added to the wage table, but there were no, it was kind of like blanked out. So just, can you provide clarification? Are you saying that they will not be entitled to contractual raises, or was that just kind of like a holding spot?
Our idea there is that by settling the lawsuit, they would gain many rights and benefits that they didn't have before. We're trying to limit the financial impact right now on the city. We're not the financially.
I get it. My question was like, would they
greedy
never
people
be entitled to contractual benefits, or are they just not entitled to contractual benefits during this contract?
They would be entitled to contractual benefits. You're just asking specifically about that wage table. We're just not asking for any additional wages during this contract period. Okay. We would negotiate everything at the next negotiations process the year after next.
So they would get whatever other benefits that they were entitled to in the contract, with the exception of the wages, and then next contract term we'll negotiate it as a block.
That's correct.
If there's nothing else, I think we're starting to get up on that 12 o'clock hour. So if we can plan for our next meeting, and that give you an opportunity to caucus too, and come back with some of your replies and some of our replies. But we have a calendar here of some dates we have available. One is July 7th at Monday morning. We're available. July 14th, the morning, we're available. Skip the 10th. The 10th, July 10th, we're available that morning, available from 9 to 12. July 11th, the afternoon is available. I've already said the 14th, the morning, and also the 17th, the morning is available. I've got some more if you want to keep going. 21st, I'm sorry, the morning, 24th, the morning, and 25th, the afternoon.
Mr. Williams, you don't have anything available between now and July 7th?
No, unfortunately, we have conferences going to be out of town starting this week. I'm starting this week, myself and the city attorney. And so there's travel involved. These are the dates that we are available. And I missed July 2nd all day. July 2nd, all day. I thought I told them the 7th already, didn't I?
Yeah, but it was, the 7th was available, just the morning.
Morning. We're just as anxious as you are. That's why we sent notice to resume these talks.
Our side issues with conferences and all as well, on the dates you suggested.
Okay. You got some other days you want to suggest? But those, we've pre-checked all of our calendars and that. So if you want to get back with us or something, those are the days we know that we are.
We can email those dates.
Yeah,
We
I was
can-
just about, you read my mind.
We can email those dates to you at the conclusion of the meeting. And if you want to shoot back over what works or propose some additional dates, that'll allow us to kind of line up the calendar as well.
Perfect.
Did I read your mind? Good.
Okay, anything else? Thank you.
So I would say that I know that there was some concerns, and Ms. Morgan and I talked about this morning. I hope he doesn't mind that I say that, but we talked about there's some concerns that the union had with the organizational chart. I did speak with the chief about it and suggested that you guys take a time to meet prior to the next meeting to kind of address those concerns based on the email that Jeff sent. Also, like, we also proposed some changes for the temporary promotions, but I don't think that there's a policy in place for that. And so if it's too ambitious, we'd also ask that y'all kind of meet, make some time to meet with the chief on that as well, so that we can discuss some of that, the contractual language that we're talking about, adding it. So removing maybe the policy language that you talked about, but adding some, I guess, like guiding posts in the contract for it, if that's possible within that time, knowing that probably won't all get resolved, but if we can at least start the conversation, that'd be helpful.
Okay, if there's nothing else, meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.